We are now recording on Zoom. If there are any directors in the attendee list who have not yet been promoted to panelists, if you could please raise your hand, that would be great. Thank you.
We're going to try.
I'll call the meeting to order. District Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Chair Rayburn,
Here.
Vice Chair Howdeshelt,
Here.
Director Allen, Director Byrd,
Here.
Director Chapman,
Here.
Director Daniels,
Here.
Director Dufty, Director Freericks, Director Hernandez, Director Holmes, Director Jane,
Here.
Director Lee, Director Maple,
Here.
Director Saltzman, Director Torres,
Here.
Director Loloe, Director Kennedy, Director Dowden Calvillo, Director McConnell, Director McConnell, Director Stallard.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Director Stallard, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
With pleasure. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone, to the 136th board meeting for the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority Board. Please note, today's meeting is an in-person meeting in the San Francisco Bay Area Rapid Transit Boardroom, 2150 Webster Street in Oakland, with an option for participation via teleconference. Please also note that board members participating via teleconference, welcome all, are doing so in locations posted 72 hours in advance of the meeting that are open and available for public participation. You can download the agenda and presentation materials at www.capitalcorridor.org/ccjpa-board. All speakers, including Capital Corridor Board and staff, are requested to announce their name as they begin to speak. For public participants who joined in person, if you would like to provide public comments, please complete a request to address the board form available at the entrance to the boardroom and hand it to the Secretary, April Quintanilla, in the dais. For public participants who joined by telephone, your microphones are automatically muted. If you wish to speak on an agenda item, please dial *9 to virtually raise your hand. Then when public comment is announced, when it's your turn to speak, you will need to dial *6 to accept the unmute request. For public participants who join via Zoom, please use the raised hand feature if you wish to speak. To board members and staff who've joined via Zoom, please mute your microphones whenever you are not speaking so we can avoid any background noise. If you wish to make a public comment on a subject not on the agenda, you will be given an opportunity to speak under item Roman numeral 7. However, if you have a comment on an item that is on the agenda, we will take those comments after staff presentation and prior to the board discussion. Public comment is limited to 2 minutes per person per item. Comments which have been received via email by 3 p.m. on Tuesday, November 14th, have been provided to the board and will be included as a permanent part of the meeting record. Comments received after that time will be provided to the board following the meeting. Board members, in order to reduce confusion throughout the meeting, when it is time for director's remarks, I will call for board member comments. Vice Chair Howdesheld and I will speak last. In the interest of time and to provide an opportunity for equal participation, please try to keep your comments concise. Next, I would like to welcome Gina Zalin, who is serving as the interim general counsel. Gina has supported the CCJPA since June 2021, initially serving as the associate general counsel. Welcome, Gina, and thank you for your continued support. We look forward to working with you in this expanded capacity. This concludes the report of the chair. Thank you very much. We'll move next to the consent calendar. I'll take a motion if anybody.
Consent calendar.
Thank you. And would you call the roll, please? District Secretary.
Certainly. Chair Rayburn,
Yay.
Vice Chair Howdeshell,
Yes.
Director Allen, Director Byrd,
Here.
Director Byrd, aye, we're on the consent calendar. Should I register
I'm
with
here.
aye?
I said aye. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay, we can hear you. Okay, thank
All
you. Director Chapman.
Aye.
Director Daniels. Director Dufty.
Aye.
Director Freericks. Director Hernandez. Director Holmes. Director Jane.
Yeah.
Director Lee. Director Maple.
Aye.
Director Saltzman.
Yes.
Director Torres.
Aye.
Director McConnell.
Aye.
Director Stallard.
Aye.
Thank you very much. The motion carries unanimously.
Next, we'll move to item 5.1, the action on San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority Mechanical Services Agreement. Rob Paget, would you?
Good morning, Rob Paget here, Managing Director. I will cover this first item. This first agenda item is to establish a joint services agreement with the San Joaquin's Joint Powers Authority to provide support for mechanical services for the equipment in Northern California. This approach will follow a very similar structure to what we have in place with the Wi-Fi and PIDS agreements, where a capital corridor provides these services to San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority under such an agreement. The intent of this change is to support the maintenance of equipment that will now include the venture cars, which I know we're all excited to hear are going to be in service as of early December, and the remainder of the Northern California fleet, all of which is owned by the state of California. At present, our venture car maintenance is undertaken by TASI, a subsidiary to the Herzog, under an agreement with the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority. This approach will expand the scope of the TASI services to cover all of the fleet in Northern California under an agreement, a contract agreement with the San Joaquin's Joint Powers Authority. The contract will be administered by that agency, and CCJPA will reimburse for these services through our annual state operating funding agreement, and CCJPA staff will actively engage in the oversight of the agreement. We're asking for your approval today for the joint services agreement between this CCJPA and San Joaquin's Joint Powers Authority to enter into an agreement for the maintenance of the equipment pool used in the Northern California service. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. Do we have any public comments?
I didn't receive any speaker cards, and I don't see any hands raised on Zoom for public comment.
And I'm looking up and down the dais to see if there are director comments or questions.
This is
Chair-
Director Jane.
Thank you.
I had a question. I just wanted to know, is there going to be an event for the public for the new venture cars in December?
Oh,
So we will let you know. I do expect that there will be some sort of an event. What we're likely to do is let the cars go into service for a little while and get through the initial efforts to do that so that staff is comfortable maintaining and also operating the service. And then we will have an event, and we will certainly let the board be aware of it. So if you're interested in participating, you can join us.
Great, thank you.
let's see, I have to look over my shoulder to see if anybody has their hand raised remotely. Thank you, Director Jane, for speaking out. Any other comments from the board? I'll just note that looking forward in the package to slide number 10 on our performance report, our expenses for 2023, fiscal year 2023, for train and locomotive maintenance totaled 19% of our budget, or 11.6 million. So there's a tremendous amount of potential savings, I believe, woven into this action. Am I correct?
We do expect to see some cost savings with this action. I don't have for you today a specific estimate of what that will be, but we are looking forward to opportunities to maintain our equipment in a more efficient manner, but also to improve the reliability. That's equally important in this change.
Thank you.
Chair
Any other-
Rayburn, if there are no other questions, I'll move the item.
Thank you.
Jane, seconds.
I have a motion and a second by Bruce Haudesheld, and please call the roll, Assistant Secretary.
Chair Rayburn,
Yay.
Vice Chair Hodeschelt,
Yes.
Director Allen, Director Byrd,
Aye.
Director Chapman.
Aye.
Director Daniels. Director Dufty. Director Freericks, Director Hernandez, Director Holmes,
Aye.
Director Jane.
Yes.
Director Lee, Director Meeple,
Aye.
Director Saltzman,
Yes.
Director Torres.
Aye.
Director McConnell,
Aye.
Director Stallard.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Chair Rayburn, before we move on, is there any way that, for at least for you, that you could get the hybrid screen here so you could see folks that maybe raise their hands so we don't see the back of you?
Yeah, when I,
Oh, you found it. Oh,
well, no, this is, oh, there it is. I'm getting ads too. Yeah,
that's one.
okay.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's move on to,
Service,
we've taken some actions, and let's move on to potential actions to reduce Amtrak operating expenses.
Great. Rob Paget here again, and I will be presenting this item with my deputy, Leo Sanchez. This is an informational item, and it's part of our agreement with CalSTA this year. So you remember in our last meeting, we discussed as a part of our operating funding for this year, the request was made that we provide CalSTA with information on cost-cutting efforts, both those that we've already undertaken, but also potential cost-cutting efforts moving forward. So we're going to talk about that today. And know that the goal of this is in large part to document that we have been aware of the need to operate our service efficiently. We've had an impact from the pandemic, and we want to make the case for more funding. And part of making the case for more funding is to establish that you've been active in running your service as efficiently as possible. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today, and you'll see we have been very active in addressing things where we can take action. We're going to talk about some things that are in the works that aren't quite done yet. And then there's going to be another set of actions which look a little bit more dire that we hope we will not take. And those actions are things that we think will negatively impact customers and likely impact ridership. But we do need to put that out there in the instance that we don't get sufficient funding in FY25 and beyond. The thing that I want to point out to everyone here and also to anybody who's listening from the public is we have an annual business planning process that will kick off here in a few months. Anything that we do that changes our service is included in that business plan. That will come back to the board in April for approval, but we will also have an opportunity for public engagement. We're going to do our meetings on the train this year and do some other virtual meetings. So lots of opportunity for feedback, and we want to hear that feedback. So I want to give all that as intro to what we're going to cover today. If we can go to the next slide, please. And I've talked about this already, so we can go to the next slide, please. So this just gives you a sense as to what we've seen during the pandemic in terms of ridership. And if you look at our shortfall, it's entirely revenue. And in fact, we're actually even ahead of where we are in terms of loss of revenue. And you can also see here that we're still on a steady march upward. Understand that we're running about 85% of our pre-pandemic service. That sounds probably better than it is because there's some gaps in there on service. And we do think we're also having some cases where we don't have enough cars in place. So we have a few trains that are running at capacity. So we're starting to see some impacts with our equipment shortage that are potentially impacting revenue. If you can go to the next slide. And this is a high-level overview of where we are on operating expenses. So operating expenses are the right part of this column here for every year. And you can see we're basically where we were back pre-pandemic, even considering all the inflationary pressures during that period. On the left side, you'll see I think it's purple, I'm not sure, but that is the revenue. And the remainder of that is the subsidy that we provide to run the service. The dotted line represents the 50% cost recovery ratio, which is the expectation of our service. You can see we were well above that in 2018 and 2019. We were running about 38% in 2023. So when you think about what we're trying to do here, there are two things. We're trying to work within the range of what funding we have available. And then I do think the expectation will be that we get back to a 50% cost recovery ratio in hopefully not the too distant future. If you go to the next slide, please. This will show you revenue. Almost all of our revenue comes from ticket sales. The other revenue actually includes, some of that is kind of ticket sales because it's when people use their Amtrak points that shows up under other revenue. And then we also have some revenue from the food and beverage service on the trains. And you can see we were at 38 million, and we didn't do a total here, 38 million in 2019, 23.1 million in 2023. So we're down about 15 million. Go to the next slide, please. And this will show you expenses. And I know Chair Rayburn pointed out the mechanical, which is roughly 19%. And another significant amount is the train and engineer operations, which is the conductors and engineers that operate the trains. The third-party expenses are pretty much set. So that's the access to Union Pacific's right-of-way and the fuel costs. We have station costs, which are about 10%, which we have had some pretty positive changes on. I'll talk about that. And then onboard services as well. And you can see connecting motor coach, about 5%. A lot of that is the Emeryville to San Francisco connection, totaling $60 million in FY23. Next slide. So this will just show you where we were in 19 and 23. And we'll talk about some of the actions we've taken to save costs. A lot of that has really been in the stations area and in the connecting motor coach, but we've had some other nominal changes in other places. A lot of the other savings has come through a reduction in service during the period. Go to the next slide, please. So now I'm going to turn it over to Leo, who will walk through actions we've taken to date and then talk about some of the other potential actions in the future.
Thank you, Rob. Again, I'm Leo Sanchez, Deputy Managing Director, Capital Corridor. Good morning, members of the board. Today, I will be providing you an update on actions that we have taken to reduce operating expenses, talk with you about a few short-term actions that staff is working on, and lastly, discuss contingency options and truly measures of last resort that we could take to reduce operating expenses drastically in the event of a fiscal crisis. So on this first slide, I'm going to be discussing actions that CCJPA staff have taken to date to reduce operating expenses. The areas highlighted are buses, stations, equipment, and service reduction related expenses. In the area of bus expenses, the actions we have taken have resulted in savings of over $4 million a year. Some of the actions taken here include reducing the number of buses required to operate the San Francisco to Emeryville connection, also known as Route 99, from 8 to 3 buses, and working with transit agencies like El Dorado Transit to partner in providing a service where we have mutual benefit. On stations, we have partnered with Amtrak to update hours served and also aligning the staffing needs, which have resulted in nearly $3 million in annual savings. In terms of equipment, before the pandemic, CCJPA leased a number of equipment from Amtrak to run our service. The state, along with the 3 JPAs, worked in conjunction to return about 20 cars and locomotives back to Amtrak, which this resulted in statewide annual savings. For CCJPA, our portion is about $1.5 million. Collectively, the 3 JPAs have saved through this action about $8 million. For service reductions, we are continuing to run the reduced service of 24 weekday trains down from 30 pre-COVID, which means this saves us 1 train set. We're running with 8 train sets. Previously, we were running with 9. And on the operating side, this results to about $4 million in savings. So overall, the actions we've taken so far have resulted in nearly $14 million in savings annually. Next slide. So in terms of some short-term actions that we are taking to generate revenue and reduce cost, the main areas that I'm going to be focusing on here are buses, stations, and service revenue. On buses, we are currently working on a multi-ride ticket fare increase to bring up with parity on those tickets for the Emeryville to San Francisco connection. And this will result in about $50,000 additional per year. And this is the fastest escalating cost that we've seen on any of our buses. On stations, we are continuing to work with Amtrak to implement station hour reductions and aligning on staffing needs. This is going to result in nearly $800,000 a year. And lastly, on service revenue, we're pursuing cafe pricing increase and general multi-ride ticket increase that we have not raised in many years. This is the one area that's particularly exciting is that tomorrow we're actually going to be launching our Pet Sound board. So that is going to result in additional revenue. And all told, between both categories, the cost savings and the revenue generated, this is over $1 million in yearly savings or net positive savings. So I think we can go to the next slide. In terms of contingency options, and before I dive into this slide, I want to start by saying that I realize that some of these are draconian measures, but they are actions that we could take to ensure that we keep some level of service running in the event of fiscal crisis. So the areas shown here are similar to those that I've covered when I started, and those are buses, stations, revenue, and service reductions. However, on this slide, what I'm showing is the low and high range, because there's a variety of things that we could do on each one of the categories that could affect the range of savings. So I'll start by talking about buses. We could do a potential additional bus reduction, which would yield additional savings, or completely suspend the Emeryville to San Francisco connection. On stations, we could work to make further reductions. On revenue, we could explore more aggressive fare increase across all ticket types. And you can see here, what I'm showing is somewhere in the range of additional revenue of $2 to $3 million. And on service reductions, we could potentially revisit going back to where we were before and the early onset of the pandemic, which was utilizing 7 train sets down from the 8 that we're using today. And this could result in additional savings in the categories shown. So in this slide, the total range that you're seeing is a cost savings of somewhere between 3 to 11 million. And again, I realize that these are very significant actions that would affect our service, but are options that we could deploy in fiscal crisis. We're going to continue to work with our partners at the other 2 JPAs, Losan and San Joaquin, along with the state, to explore ways to save cost or increase revenue. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Rob and Leo, for your presentations. Do we have any public comments?
I didn't receive any speaker cards, but I do see a hand raised on Zoom.
Please proceed.
Michael, please go ahead.
Good morning. Michael Andrew Barnbaum, and I'm joining via Zoom from home in Sacramento, as there was not a location on the agenda to join from in Sacramento. So wanted to speak and piggyback on this. I was part of the last quarterly that the CCJPA held, and this was one of the main topics of discussion. So I would like to see, as far as cost savings and where funds could be reinvested into revenue, go to until AC Transit gets all their topics in order with CCJPA, that the current Emeryville San Francisco service be eliminated and redirect passengers to connect to San Francisco at Richmond. The new fleet of the future has great bicycle capacity, stops at more San Francisco destinations than the existing throughway bus service does. And the direct service on the Red Line at Richmond also allows riders to make Caltrain connections at Millbrae or get direct access to domestic and international flights at San Francisco International Airport. So the Richmond connection would be a win-win-win for CCJPA and its managing agency, the San Francisco Bay Area Rapid Transit District. And if that is possible to begin on New Year's Day, then great. I think that that's a connection that should be promoted well above and beyond the connection at Emeryville. Thank you for allowing me to participate. And if you have any questions, I'll be here throughout the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnbaum. Do we have any other comments?
I don't see any additional hands raised for public comment.
I'll turn to the board. First is Director Salzman.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this before us today. Can you go back to slide 14, the one about the contingency plans? And the first request I would have is, you gave us a lot more detail today, and that was very helpful. I think it would be helpful to have that in writing about what these things actually look like and what they mean, that this would mean fare increases on all ticket types, and what actually would that look like? What is the fare increase? And how much service are we actually reducing? Like, what is the impact on the rider? Because I think we need to communicate this with the state about how severe this is. And here it's hard to tell. I mean, I look at it and it seems pretty severe, but I think we know a lot more here internally. But you painted a much more detailed picture of it today. So I think that will be important to do. And then a couple other things. On the Emeryville to San Francisco buses, what is the status with AC Transit? You know, they have the funding to provide that service. I know they're really struggling with staffing, but it's concerning that we might have to consider eliminating the service when really they should be providing the service. So what can we do on that?
Thank you for the question. Rob Padgett here again. I'll go in reverse order on the question. So the first question about AC Transit. So AC Transit, as part of a TRSA application for new zero emissions vehicles, included in that an expectation that it would serve the connection between Emeryville and San Francisco. So we could run it as open door service. The service for those who aren't familiar, the service we operate today is a closed door service. So you have to have a ticket on the train to be able to board the bus, and it's operated by a private contractor. So we go out and we bid that service, and it has rapidly escalated in costs. I'm sure the private contractors are struggling with labor issues like everybody is, and that has been a real significant change over time. But we have been working with AC Transit at a staff level to work on a plan for how that change would happen. And I would say that we do need to continue to push for that, although it's included in the TRSIP application. In the current draft of their service plan that is on the street, which we are going to respond to, it is not clearly included as a more immediate action. And so our hope, and we really think it's good from our standpoint, staff level, a good policy to have an open door service is going to improve connections for Emeryville, but also make it open to those who live in Emeryville and then can take the service. And it's in many ways like what we did in El Dorado, where we provided that service now to everybody. So you don't have to buy a ticket if you live in Sacramento and you just want to go up to South Lake Tahoe, you can just buy a ticket for that segment. So we're thinking about that. And then on your second comment about the detail, we hear you on that point. And when we respond to the state, we will definitely lay that out. On the fare increase, I'll say before we do anything on the fare side, we think that we need to do more work in that area to understand a little bit more about where we stand today. How are we relative to other services? Are we too high, too low on 10 ride, monthly, single ride? And all of that we need to do in the context of the idea that eventually we're going to move to the tap to ride system, where we want it to be a very accessible system. So that's the fare structure we've operated under for many years. We think over time will change, but we need to really do a lot of legwork that we've not yet done before we come back with a proposal. The numbers that you see today really represent a very rough 10% increase in costs. In terms of where exactly that hits people, we haven't gotten into that level of detail yet. Hope that answers your question.
I think even just communicating that it would be 10%, because especially our single ride tickets, they're already not cost competitive. And we know that. We know that there's some people who don't ride our service because it's too expensive and they feel like they can do it cheaper in their car, especially if they're driving a couple of people. So I think we need to communicate that to the state, that even though we don't know exactly what we need to do with our fares, we do know that increasing will turn more people away and we'll lose more riders. And it might actually move us in the opposite direction, because most of the people, and we see this in a later presentation, are getting the Capitol Corridor with their cars, which means they have a car, or somebody in their family or friends they have access to a car. So they could make the full trip in a car. So I think we need to be really careful here. I know you're not recommending we do these things, but we need to explain the gravity to the state of what this would mean. And it could just put us in a downward spiral where we're losing more and more riders. If we reduce service and increase fares, I just can't see our ridership ever getting back to the point it used to be at.
Yeah, appreciate the comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see Director Jane has his hand raised remotely, and then I'll go to Director Daniels and Director Howdeshell.
Yeah, I'd primarily raised my hand to understand what you meant by aggressive fare increases. And I think I'm hearing that's 10%. I think one of the ways I agree with Director Saltzman that one of the ways out of this is to increase ridership to that 50% of subsidy level. And I like the idea that we have had Levi Stadium trains that are full. And I know that currently we run 5 to 6 car trains. We could actually go to a 7-car train for those. I'm just trying to understand what it would take to do that. I've been pushing this because I see this as a way is to get brand new riders to our system that have never used Capitol Corridor. So expanding ridership is a key thing. And then finally, I wanted to understand what is the probability that we expect to be in a crisis situation?
Both very good questions. And first, a comment on the special events. And I know if you talk to our marketing team, they will say, absolutely, we agree 100%. That is the venue in which we share our service for the first time for a lot of people. And so as we get these venture cars in the San Joaquin Valley, we're going to benefit from their bi-level equipment. So we'll kind of get their bi-level equipment and we'll be able to run the longer trains. We have been constrained in these special events to 5 cars because we simply don't have the fleet availability to provide that service. So we agree 100%. That's our goal in the next year is we're going to run longer trains and serve all these special events. Keep rooting for the 49ers. Every time they win, that's a good thing for us. So and then your second comment about probability. So I think we have very solid political support at the highest levels within the state of California for rail. And I know that we are working closely with CALSA to get support. The amount of funding we need collectively across the 3 JPAs to get there is in the range of $40 to $50 million. And I don't know, I can't speak for the other 2 JPAs in terms of cuts that they can make that are not going to hit riders. I know we've really stretched and we've done some really good things. So I would say that I'm optimistic about our ability to get enough funding in FY25 to continue to run our service. And we also agree that the real answer is to expand ridership. Part of that's going to be extending these trains that are currently at capacity with standing room only, some of these busier trains. And part of that is going to be returning some of the service that now leaves some pretty big gaps in the day. All that's going to help us bring ridership back. And we agree that's the real answer here going forward, is to carry as many people as we can on our service.
Thank you. Director Daniels.
Thank you very much. I just want to make sure I understand something in the presentation. Under the expenses, you listed onboard services cafe at 4.7 million in expenses. And then on the revenue side, you just mentioned food and beverage at bringing in 1.2 million. Are those still the same thing?
This is Leo, Deputy Managing Director. So it is in the same category. One of them is talking about the expense and the other part is talking about the revenue we get from the cafe service that we're providing.
So we're spending $4.7 million to generate $1.2 million.
That is correct.
That's horrible. I mean, you couldn't run a business like that. And what causes such a huge gap in those two numbers?
It's not meant to make.
Yeah, Rob Paget here. So we do run that at a loss, and that is pretty standard in places where this cafe service is run. The current loss, though, is greater than what it has been historically. Historically, we've been running at about a 50% loss. One of the things that we could look at that would not have the same level of impact is if you didn't run onboard services at the same level you do today. So you take some of the trains that are less busy and you don't run onboard services. And we have done that in the past, not without precedent. That is one of the things, and when we show that range of cuts, that's the kind of thing you can do. I do think if you didn't run the onboard services, given the length of our service and the brand of our service, we would see a ridership and a revenue impact on the other side as well. So, I'd certainly say we have to look at that as an amenity that we provide on the service, but we certainly hear your point about the gap in that.
Is there any thought of looking at automation in that area? Because as a person who has ridden the train and has gone to this 49er games and stuff like that, I can tell you that tons of sales are lost because the line's just too long and whatnot. And so automation to me would be a key, and maybe even a reduction in prices too, because I'm not going to the cafe and spending a certain amount of money for a certain quality of food. I'm going to eat before I get on and I'm going to eat when I get off. And so that may be something to be examined too. But I want to say that I tremendously admire you coming out and looking at ways to cut the cost. When we're in government and when we have politicians and stuff like that, we typically think that, well, if we're not increasing things, if we're not making things bigger, if we're not growing things, then we're not doing what we should be doing. And in fact, it takes a really strong position to do fewer things better. And I think we should be looking at doing fewer things better and really figuring out a way to cut those costs and be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar too. So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate the comment. And you're correct on the automation. One of the good and the bad things about being attached to Amtrak is you benefit from a national corporation that does lots of things in lots of places, but it also means you accept whatever the technology is that they adopt if you're not going to go and do it on your own. And my team is actually quite engaged on the onboard services front in a lot of ways and trying to push innovation. And we agree with you on the speed. So that is on our plate for something we're trying to work on. Thank you for the comment.
And Vice Chair Howard-Scheld.
Yeah, thank you, Leo. On slide 12, I want to make sure I understand the actions taken on buses. So the italicized and the asterisk Route 99 for bus fare increase, that's actually an add that's happened. So that adds.
Yep, this is Leo. And yes, that specific item was a revenue increase. So we did do a fare increase about a year ago. And so that did result in about, I think it was 75,000 a
Okay.
year in revenue.
Great, and I wanted to follow up on Director Saltzman's questions. And have you done an analysis on, okay, if we increase the fare this much, we're likely to have ridership be impacted this way or that way? I mean, do that.
So that is one of the things that we're going to be pursuing as part of a broader fare study. And that, so today we don't know the answer to that as to what that means, but we do want to come back with
No, I
that.
think that's important, right? And maybe even dynamic pricing, right? So, thanks.
Thank you very much. And Director Allen has joined us. Welcome.
Yes, my apologies for being late. I just, first I want to just say generally to you, Rob, and to your staff, I really appreciate the depth of your analysis here in this presentation, outlining the different expenses. And this is a deep dive that I'm happy to see, that people are actually looking at individual operating expenses and how we can increase revenue. So thank you to you and your team for this presentation, because this kind of depth in presentation then allows questions like the question from Director Daniels about the cafe service, right? And I think that was a great question. Should we continue to operate a cafe service at I think you said it was a 75% loss at this point right now, right? And certainly I would say no. If we were looking to return to a 50% fare box recovery, we should be looking at not just cutting it blanket, right? I mean, we have to be more thoughtful than that. Certainly we could be looking at where is that service really being used at what times of day, and not operating that service, or on certain lines, not operating it when there's really not a demand for it. And so those are the thoughtful things that we're able to get out of this kind of information. I think I actually have one question, and that is the 50% fare box recovery. I just want to refresh my memory that is a federal requirement. Is that
It's this is Rob here. So that's actually a state requirement.
state requirement?
Correct.
Okay, and it's in conjunction with our state funding.
That's right, because we currently only receive state funding for operations, and that is a part of the agreement that we have with the state, as the interagency transfer agreement that gives us the authority to run the service. Part of that is the 50% cost recovery expectation. It has not been enforced during the pandemic.
Great, and I appreciate your diligence in this difficult situation for everyone. And I think the analysis of, the other analysis of fare increases is also a great question. We can't just, do across the board things, but maybe there are areas where there is certain demand that fare increases could be palatable, at least at certain levels. Thank you.
And then I have Director Torres, followed by Director Saltzman wants to jump back in the queue.
Great, thank you.
And Director,
I'm wondering if we can go back to I think it was slide 12 from the presentation. I believe it, yeah, that one right there. So just like Director Saltzman, I'm concerned about the fare increase, especially since I saw that our ridership is significantly down, and I think we all know why, right? I represent downtown San Jose on the San Jose City Council, and office workers are not back at all in downtown. And so that's what keeps me up at night, is office workers not being in our downtown because of remote work, et cetera. So yeah, 10% is, I believe, a lot. But and I'll go back to the fare in a little bit, but one of my questions is the reducing of buses and bus routes, and then or eliminating them. That's obviously based on data, right? That's obviously based on people not coming and using this service, right?
Rob Padgett here. So it's based on data, but I would say what we put on the table here in terms of the Emeryville to San Francisco connection, is really a rapid cost escalation. That the cost of that service has gone up about 80% during the course of the pandemic. But we do track ridership on our bus routes and the recovery of the costs on those bus routes. There is a requirement. It's super complicated, but there is a requirement about the percentage of costs that we recover for any sort of connecting bus route. So we're required to track that pretty carefully.
Okay. Yeah, because I do see, again, these are areas where I know, I'm not an expert in California, but we've all driven down the 101 or other highways in California, and you notice that these are some of the cities that don't have the best infrastructure, and so right, I think it's important to connect California in different ways, right? The other one was I'm a little bit confused about it's the next slide, I believe, about the pets on board. So we're charging these, we're adding an extra charge to our furry friends.
We are adding an extra charge to our furry friends, yes. And we're actually one of the last routes in the country to adopt pets on board. This has been something Amtrak's been gradually adopting, and we are having a press event tomorrow to announce that. And so there is a pretty significant administrative cost to doing this. So because we only allow 2 pets per car, so we'll actually have to require a reservation for pets, unlike yourself. So you can get on the train now, any train you want to get on, and we don't have a cap on ridership for any train. But if you're a furry friend, you got to make sure you have a reservation. So stay tuned. Tomorrow, we'll have a fun day out in Emeryville.
All right. Okay. So we're thinking of increasing our tickets, but then adding a charge to our furry friends. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, so to be clear, we don't currently allow pets on trains. So it will be a new service that we have. This is actually something that's across the country. We generally follow Amtrak's policies in terms of onboard ridership, and we're following their own approach to pets on board that they've used in other parts of the country. We certainly don't want to add it as an expense to our service. At a minimum, we want to break even in terms of the additional labor costs that happens as a result of this. But the main goal in it really is to provide flexibility for people that want to travel with their pets, so they don't have to drive because they can't take a cat or a dog on the train.
Right. What are we doing for folks who have to have a dog with them? Service.
They have always been able to ride. That is
Okay.
that is already.
So they won't be
in place.
charged.
Correct. That is
That's-
correct.
That's what. Maybe I should have asked that question.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Service dogs for our veterans and our seniors and folks nowadays, folks with mental health are getting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's still free
Correct.
and there's no limit. You said
I don't think I want to speak on, in a public meeting about what the specifics of the policy. I'm not familiar with it, but I do know that service animals are absolutely allowed on board.
Okay.
Without a charge.
No, great. And I think we all saw, and I'll go back. I'm just going reverse of what the slides. So we spent 1.2. I thought I saw one. I don't know if we can go back to it. I thought I saw $1.2 million in marketing for the Capital Corridor. I think it was the slide after this, or maybe it was way before this. I'm sorry. It was a long presentation. A good one though, by the way, just letting you all know. keep going to I forgot where it was or where I saw it. Marketing. 1 million. So we spend $1 million on marketing. I know when the city spends $1 million on marketing, it tells us like how much, money we get back. So out of that $1 million, what is our return rate?
So, and I'd like to clarify that. So what you're seeing here, this is the Amtrak reimbursed expenses. So the way that we reimburse Amtrak is through a very complicated cost allocation approach. And we reimburse Amtrak for what they consider to be the benefits that we get from their marketing, but it's really part of their national marketing campaign. Okay. My team also has a direct expense on the marketing. We do track independent marketing efforts. I don't have those numbers in front of me. We can certainly get back to you on that. But we have in our own team funding that's dedicated to Capital Corridor specific marketing. This is a pretty narrow line here in terms of what it covers.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, but I understand it. It is very concerning, right? That that we're not up to the ridership of 2019, but I'm not going to sit here and let you all know what happened right after that, right? We all know what happened, and COVID-19 just changed the whole ball game, right? For downtowns and for transportation and whatnot. So one day I do hope, as a downtown council member, for a very, very busy urban city, that office workers do come back, right? And that obviously is going to help bring up our ridership. So we're still, the mayor and myself are still trying to figure out how to bring back office workers, but COVID-19 just changed how everybody works or where everybody works, and so we're playing defense more than we're playing offense. So speaking about the Niners. So anyways, go Niners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. Director Salzman, followed by Director Stallard.
I just wanted to speak up on behalf of the cafe car service. I, still ride Capital Corridor, but I used to be a much more regular rider. And I can tell you when you're, rushing to make that train, you don't have time to grab food, or you're going to miss a train and wait an hour and a half or two. So you're not going to miss that train. And if there was no food, especially those people who are riding all the way from San Jose to Sacramento, that is far too long to go without food or drink. So to just lose the cafe car service, I think we'd lose a lot of riders, and we'd end up losing more money than we'd recover, because it's the main thing. And lots of people, especially in that evening commute, they like to be able to get a glass of beer or wine on their trip. And that's a big part of why they do it. They get to set up their desks with their laptops. They get to relax with their beer and their wine. You take the nice parts of the train away, all of a sudden it doesn't sound so great anymore. So I think we'd be really hurting our service and our ridership if we got rid of it. I do think the prices are quite low in the cafe car. It's always strange to me when we charge so much for tickets that things are very, very cheap in a cafe car. So with inflation, I think it would be just fine to increase prices, but I think it would be a huge mistake. And I would want to survey the riders before we ever considered something like that, even just reducing it on some of the cars, because not knowing when your train would have it, that would make it almost just as bad as not having it at all, because you couldn't really plan around that, especially if you're not able to take the same exact train every day. And then you miss that one, you get the next one, and the next one doesn't have food and you're stuck there for 2 or 3 hours. It's a problem. So I hope we won't rush into anything like that, even if it looks smart on paper, because we'd save some money and we're losing money. I think we're actually recovering the money in the fare revenue. So let's be careful with that.
Thank you. And Director Stallard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And coming right after the prior comments, I'm at the other end of the spectrum. Can our trains function without cafe cars, or do they have essential functions that require that every train have one?
So Rob Padgett here. I'll take both questions together. So the cars themselves also function as our Wi-Fi brain. So the cars would have to operate. They are required for our consist and our technology to work, but the cafe itself doesn't have to be staffed. We did previously have a couple of trains that did not operate cafe service. There's another challenge that's, in addition to the customer side of it, where the customer doesn't necessarily know if there's food service on one train or another, they're not going to be able to keep track of it. From a communication standpoint and a marketing standpoint and schedule standpoint, it added a lot of complexity to the way that we communicated with passengers. So we did a few years, it was actually right before the pandemic, we did make a decision to offer it on those last couple trains because it simplified. And we really pushed the simplicity of our service. We have unreserved for that reason. We have easy returns. There's a lot of stuff we do to keep things simple. And very much in that vein, we wanted to do the same for onboard services. We have not raised, you're correct, the prices are too low. And that is one of the things that in the efforts to deal with all the other things we've been dealing with over the last couple of years, we've let that go. But we're set to change prices on December 1st, and we're going to get more in line with what what we should be charging. And that will, you'll see, it will help quite a bit with revenue. And as I mentioned before, the speed of transactions is something else that we can do. I do know that as part of the venture car rollout in the San Joaquin Valley, they're going to have vending machines. They're not going to have cafe cars. And so we're going to watch that really carefully because I think that's a really good test. We would have to do some capital intensive work to change it. So I don't want to suggest that's easy, but we can at least watch this rollout in the San Joaquin Valley and see how it works and keep track with customer satisfaction as we go forward. And I think that'll be another example of data that we can use to think about what kind of decisions we want to make. And we'll certainly bring that issue back to you in the future.
If I could continue just briefly, while it may not be the appropriate model in all instances, certainly those of us who engage in air travel have had to modify our behavior dramatically. Meals are not routinely served anymore. We usually bring food with us. We just get used to it, and that's the way it is. And when we have people standing on cars, because the train is so busy, the cafe car is a fairly inefficient use of space. It could also accommodate a lot more people in a seated arrangement. So I think, it's a matter of weighing economic reality with what's desirable. And we're kind of in extremis at the moment on the economic side. So I think we should be willing to look at more extreme measures. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I have one last comment. Okay, Director Maple, please.
All right, thank you. And thank you to my colleagues who also joined me on the Capital Corridor train. Our trip here was lovely, and always a great thing to be able to come here on the train itself. I appreciate the conversation around the cafe, and one of the things I'm interested in is, have we teased out where there is most interest, for example, and also where that connects economically? For example, I used to work in the restaurant industry for almost a decade, and I can tell you in most restaurants, they make their money on beverages primarily. The food is hard because the food costs are really high. But typically if people want to have, an alcoholic drink or a coffee or something like that, that is a better economic situation for them. And so I wonder if we can tease that out a little bit. Like, is there a way, maybe food is something that we're willing to cut for economic reasons, but maybe we make money on the beverages. So just curious if we've done that kind of analysis.
Yeah, I have a great team and they're way in the weeds on all that stuff. And you're accurately describing the way places where we make the most revenue, it is on beverages.
Yeah, so that might be something to consider, as you do this work. I also agree with my colleagues that shared the concern around, service cutting. I think that's a dangerous game. If we cut service, then that discourages more ridership, and then we find ourselves in a spiral. Whereas, of course, the goal always is to increase ridership. That's the goal. So, just looking at that really carefully and making sure that whatever decisions are made don't inadvertently lead to us not being able to ever recover some of that ridership, because people will just make other plans, and as we do what we need to do to survive and get to work and feed our families and whatnot. And so that may not include riding the train if it's not available. The last thing, I think we talked about this just a little bit at the last meeting, is there any ability, or has there been any discussion with negotiating with the state over this? Of course, there was, the time period during COVID when, there was leniency. Is that possible again? Have we, for example, engaged with any of our state legislators to have that conversation with CalSTA, and, strategically, what does that look like?
And I'm just going to clarify, you're talking about the cost recovery ratio in particular.
Yes.
Yeah. So I will say the San Joaquins do not operate at the 50% cost recovery ratio. So the degree to which that's enforced is unclear. But it's, where we want to go. I think what we're trying to do in all this, and you can feel this theme in it, is we are trying to keep our fares really competitive. And if you compare our fares, say the Northeast Corridor, our charges are significantly lower on a per mile basis compared to the Northeast Corridor. Amtrak has pushed to minimize its subsidy, and as a result, they really have to target the high income, high cost trips. We're not trying to do that. So what we're trying to do is run as efficiently as we can with a reasonable subsidy and keep our fares reasonable. So we're keeping our eyes on all these details, and we are going to be actively working with CalSTA And I would say, fortunately, we have a lot of good support and we're working well with the other two JPAs. We're learning from each other about ways to do things better. And we're trying to push Amtrak to do things better as well.
Wonderful. And yeah, just really appreciate the thorough presentation and, the willingness to think outside the box.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You're welcome. And one additional comment from Director
Very quick.
Daniel.
I just want to say personally, as a person who loves to ride the train and lives in Sacramento and has family in Fremont, the thing that changes my mind, though, is the cost at some level when it's not just me, it's going to be the wife, the kid, and stuff like that. And so I think if you examine that, hopefully, and I've seen those kind of things, those promotions, but when you start letting families ride at a discounted rate for the second person, and maybe even free for the third or fourth person, I think that's what encourages more people to get on the train and go somewhere down in the Bay Area. Because if I have to pay, let's say, over $100 to go one way, I'm taking the car. The car's going with me. So just something to think about, and how do we get more on fares?
Yeah, appreciate
encourage
it.
more ridership.
Yep.
And I know you do think about those kind of things, but just wanted to give them a personal perspective.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. What a healthy discussion.
Made me hungry for more information at a future
to
meeting.
get on a train and, yeah. I think that instead of addressing cuts, I just want to make a comment about the capacity for increasing service. And that's what concerns me. When I look at slide number 7, I see that October has traditionally been one of 2 months that starts spiking, and November is the other month. Well, I'm concerned that we may not have the capacity for additional riders with the trains that we have today. And it will drop off in December and typically January. But your thoughts on, can we weather this storm? And
Yeah, so good comment, and you're correct that October, November is usually when we see a surge every year, and we're doing okay. We've had a few trains that are definitely too crowded, but we, as you said, expect December will be a little slower. But by early next year, we believe we'll start getting some of the extra equipment, and we'll be ready in the new year for that growth. But we've got our eye on it.
And I'll keep investigating vending machines that are capable of photo IDing people and see what kind of legislation we might need if we have to go that route. But I really hope those are contingency issues. Also, I want to share that I believe Tap to Ride could provide some equity for our passengers. And that's one way that we can increase fares, is if we're providing good options for discounts to those in need. Let's move on. We're after 11 o'clock already, and let's hear about the performance report.
All right, I will go fast here. I'm going to turn it over to Vernay Graham. We're excited to have Vernay on our team. We introduced her at our last meeting, and she's going to talk about our plans for the annual performance report this year.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Vernay Graham, Principal Marketing Rep for Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority. Hello, everyone. Very quickly, sort of just a real quick overview of sort of the process. It's that time of year again where we'll be gathering data and information to compile for the annual performance report. Next slide, please. So for FY23, we'll continue to illustrate the story of our performance with an emphasis on rebounding and realignment with our goals. We'll compare FY23 achievements with the previous years and highlight our vision for expansion long-range projects and initiatives. Next slide. So our approach will remain the same as in FY22. We'll continue to produce a digital version of the report for the microsite that will include video messages from Rob Paget and our board chair and vice chair. Content will be shared across social media platforms, and we'll also drive traffic to the microsite by issuing a press release, which we haven't done in the past. So that's something exciting for me to be able to do, to see what sort of results we get from that. This digital alternative remains to be the most efficient and eco-friendly method to share information. Next slide, please. Key performance markers will remain the same. You received in your supplemental mailing charts that will be redesigned for the microsite, and they include sort of the overall summary, ridership and revenue charts, fare box ratio charts, on-time performance, mode split, et cetera. So those are all preliminary numbers, and those charts will be included in this report. Next slide, please. This is an example just of the chart that you've sort of already discussed and seen. This is one of the charts that will be included in the microsite. Next slide. And the good stuff. So, and finally, a look back on our accomplishments. We launched Tap to Ride pilot program, the Sacramento to Roseville third track project, Chrissy Grant, phase 1, fully funded. The success of the special event trains, 49ers, Taylor Swift, Beyonce, and Ed Sheeran, and then renewable diesel transition to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And with that, I said it would be brief. Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you for your brevity. And before I go to directors, I will first invite Jerry Grace, who's filled out a public speaking card request on this item.
Okay.
You have 2 minutes.
Good morning, everybody. I was surprised what I'm seeing here. Going back on, where is it? Okay, I'm gonna start number 4, Buzz. Before, I was surprised about, I can't say that word, but I'm gonna spell it, SJJPA. I didn't know that train started running again, and I was surprised. And I just found out some information about that, but I don't know nothing about it, and I never ruled that one yet. But I don't know where they go. I don't know where it go. I don't know when the last time would be anything at all. I need some help for that one. Next up will be, let's see. Number 13. That's the first time in a long time I went back on the Capitol. And the first time I went to Sacramento, really long time, back before everything got hit and they got everything shut down. I don't know. I had to get any information about Sacramento. The Capitol, how long ago they started up and running again. I don't know that part, but I need to ask somebody or someone tell me that information about the Capitol. When, how long ago they start. And the next thing I want to say, my next question would be, how long ago a Fairfield station is open? And how long ago that happened? I know that just before it happened, 2020 get shut down. And then how long ago is Fairfield was open? And just now, that day I went over to Sacramento and
your time is up.
Sacramento King.
Staff can address some of your questions.
I'm sorry, you said what?
Staff can address your questions regarding Fairfield.
Yes, that is a part of that, and that's what I need some help for. And how long ago the SPCA or something. But get back to my question. I'm trying to point out is, first time I rode long time, right, the Capitol, because we're to ETW, EW Rochester Metro King place. I never went to that place before, and that's the first time in a long time I went there. I'm very happy I wrote there, and I'm very happy I wrote on the Capitol again.
Thank
I'm
you,
very
Jerry.
pleased for that. Thank you very much.
Madam Secretary, do we have any other public comments?
Yes, we do on Zoom, but I didn't receive any other speaker cards.
Okay.
Okay. We'll go to Michael. Michael, please go ahead.
Good morning again. Michael Barnbaum in Sacramento. Vernay, thank you for the presentation. And just to highlight on some of the good stuff, one in particular, it was a pleasure to be aboard the Ed Sheeran train return from San Jose to Sacramento. Several of us rode the train, not necessarily for attending the concert, but we're on work assignment for Sacramento State football, as that was the day they were at Stanford and recorded the 30-23 upset over the Stanford Cardinal in Palo Alto. Several of us rode the train back and were pleased that the train was there, even though for us it was more out of coincidence and more for a reason for something else other than the Sac State Stanford game. But for the fact that the train was available, we were pleased about it and went back home with a victory, an upset victory, that is, over the Cardinal that Saturday. Last but not least, just to clarify, I know a lot of us don't speak acronym or are not in the profession. To clarify what someone had asked, what is SJJPA? That is, for the public, San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority. And their meeting is Friday. And you can get information on it at sjjpa.com. And they join via Microsoft Teams. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnbaum. And all the directors have in a salmon-colored sheet at the back of your binder the abbreviations used in connection with the Capitol Corridor. Director Daniels?
Thank you very much. I just want to call out the 31% increase in ridership. Like, wow, incredible. You know, if anybody has a business and increases business 31%, that's remarkable. So that's absolutely incredible. On the end of point performances, I know that we continue to get these tragic trespasser incidents, fatalities that cause extreme delays. And I don't know if it's available, but I think it would be nice to see what's our number absent those issues that we have no control over, because I would hope that it looks a whole lot better than that too.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands raised by the directors, we'll move on to the capital project update, starting with the PIDs.
All right, so just a reminder, Rob Paget here, and I'm here with Shirley Chen on my planning team, 10-year employee at Capitol Corridor. And we will take this as, we're going to do our highlight this week on the PIDs project, which is really exciting. We'll also be happy to take any questions on the other projects. There was an error in your packet. We were optimistic about the Davis Signal replacement project, and we said December of 23, and someone rightfully asked me, is that going to happen? And my answer is no. So we will update that for our next board meeting. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Shirley to go through where we are in the PIDs project.
Good morning, directors. I am Shirley Chen, Principal Planner and the Project Manager of the California Passenger Information Display System Modernization Project. I will be providing a project update and end with a brief overview of our existing customer touchpoints for train information. The California Passenger Information Display System, or California PIDS for short, is the system that produces and delivers train status and service information to our passengers at the stations in the form of messages on electronic displays and audio via speakers. PIDS is critical in keeping our passengers informed about train arrival times and alerting them to important service messages such as delays due to train congestion or trespasser events, while also an important way of keeping our service ADA compliant. ADA, American Disability Act. PIDS comprises both software and hardware elements and relies on telecommunications network at the stations. The existing PIDS system was designed and implemented in the early 2000s as one of the very first PIDS among US passenger rail routes. And it is currently used by the Capital Corridor, San Joaquin's, Pacific Surfliner, and ACE. While it was innovative when it was first implemented, the hardware and software are now reaching end of life and obsolescence, and we need to begin to replace it with modern hardware and software. The PIDS modernization project started in 2018, and the project scope and budget expanded once we realized that new equipment cabinets and AT&T network equipment would be required at the stations in order for the new PIDS to be wholly separate from the existing Amtrak systems at the stations. Next slide, please. The 4 core elements of the CalPIDS project is shown on this slide. To date, the new CalPIDS software is in final stages of development. We have purchased all minimum necessary hardware and are working closely with AT&T to plan out our new network. The element that I am focusing on the most currently is the installation of new equipment cabinets and new conduits for power and data cables, which is being done with the help of Amtrak contractors. As a reminder, we need new cabinets because the existing cabinets at stations do not have enough space to accommodate additional hardware needed for CalPIDS, and having our own cabinets separate from Amtrak is preferred. Next, please. To date, 12 stations have completed cabinet installations, 3 partially complete, and 2 pending permits. From left to right, the pictures show new cabinets installed at Hayward, Oakland Coliseum, Fairfield Vacaville, Sassoon Fairfield, and Martinez as examples. We expect all cabinet installation work to complete by the end of this calendar year. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, a highly anticipated deliverable of the project expected at the end of this year is the publication of our GTFS real-time feeds, which I will elaborate on. Next slide. In the first half of 2024, In the first half of 2024, we expect to complete power and telecom connections for the new cabinets, finalize the CalPIDS software, install new station hardware, and have the system tested and operational by the end of 2024. Next slide. Okay, so what is GTFS real-time and why are we so excited about it? GTFS stands for General Transit Feed Specification, and it is an open standard used to distribute relevant transit system information to riders. It allows public transit agencies to publish their transit data in a format that can be consumed by a wide variety of software applications, such as Google Maps, Apple Maps, Transit App, etc. It is the primary open standard used by transit agencies now to make their routes, schedules, trip updates, and service alerts publicly available. And GTFS consists of 2 main parts, GTFS schedule and GTFS real-time. GTFS schedule comprises of static route and schedule information, and the real-time component contains vehicle positions, trip updates, and service alerts. CCJPA has been publishing our GTFS schedule for many years. CalPIDS modernization project will now build upon the GTFS schedule and also create GTFS real-time feeds that include real-time train location from onboard GPS and automatic trip updates that account for train delays and shows real-time ETA for all stations for a particular train trip. The service alert feed, messages like system-wide delay due to train congestion or train 538 delayed due to trespasser incident, will not be created from CalPIDS until the system is fully operational because it involves creation of service alerts by the Amtrak Operations Center using the new software. However, staff are currently exploring other options that may temporarily add service alerts. The Capital Corridor GTFS real-time feeds, excluding the service alerts, are expected to be available for public use by the end of 2023. This means riders can get real-time train status information on their own personal smartphones using their transit information app of choice wherever they are. If a pit sign is out at a station, now they have another option to get the most up-to-date train status information. And I will now let Ravi Srikakula tell you more about all the different ways that our riders and customers can get train or service information.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ravi Srikakula with the Capital Corridor Marketing Team. As Shirley just mentioned, GTFS Real-Time will help us provide improved and more timely information to our customers. So currently, if you look on this slide, customers have to seek out several different sources to get the complete train information. Those are on the blue rows. In the future, GTFS Real-Time will allow for the integration of both train status and ETAs and service alerts across all customer touchpoints. And so that'll be hopefully by next summer, and we're working through that now, and that's the orange line. And it should be an overall, as a rider myself, rather than juggling different places, I can go to one place to get both train status and ETAs and service alerts all in one place. So with that, we could take some questions.
Do we have any public speakers?
Is he Jerry Grace?
Jerry Grace? I'm going to limit you to 2 minutes, Jerry. Okay. Anybody here?
Yeah, I do. The question I wanted to ask is, you said that the train coming, and how many train is there? If one of the train is delayed or the train is late, how many train you the capital have? One of the train is delayed, and how long you had to wait for the train? That's the question is, if you wait for the longer you take, the longer you had to wait. How to put out the old train, put the new train in and to place the old train is delayed or late or something will tell you what is happening. That's the question is. That is number 26.
Thank you, Jerry. I think staff can answer your question about what we're proposing. Any comments from the board?
I'm sorry, Chair Rayburn. We do have another public comment.
One more public comment, please.
Thank you. So we're going to Zoom now, and I see Doug. Doug, please go ahead.
Welcome.
Okay, this is Doug Kerr. I'm the VP North for RailPAC, Rail Passenger Association of California and Nevada. My counterpart, Brian Yanity, who's VP South for RailPAC, has worked with the Lausanne Corridor and Metrolink to have Southern California passenger information displays show all trains stopping at a given station. This includes Pacific Surfliner, Metrolink Commuter, and Amtrak's Sunset Limited, Southwest Chief, and Coast Starlight long-distance trains. RailPAC strongly recommends we follow Southern California's lead and require station displays show all trains serving each station, including Capital Corridor, San Joaquin Corridor, ACE, Caltrain, and Amtrak's Coast Starlight and California Zephyr trains. The flat screen displays at the Sacramento Valley Station already show corridor and long distance trains, and they have demonstrated that this is possible. We should always look at this from the passenger's perspective and not be guilty of a silo mentality where other organizations' trains are someone else's responsibility. We urge the displays be all-inclusive, and I would add that this concept actually falls in line with the integrated travel planning concept that Capital Corridor is working on, that we need to show all trains that stop at a given station. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. And personally, I hope to see full integration. Shirley or Ravi, do you have any responses to how we might achieve that goal?
Well, we are planning for integration. Our signs will display all the trains, all the passenger trains that arrive at our station. So it is already built in.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the survey.
Sorry, I had a question. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Doug, please.
I really
Sue.
like the integration. I rode the Capitol Quarter Sunday evening and at Berkeley Station where I got on, there were two trains northbound or eastbound and westbound arriving at exactly the same time. And the PID didn't say what track anything was going to be on. And the trains were like juggling for position because they were a couple of minutes late relative to the others. So track information is, of course, very important that we make sure that that's there. The other thing is that, we had this long discussion about cafe cars. It would be nice if the PIDs would indicate if cafe cars were operational. Maybe somebody could grab a meal before they got on the train. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment.
So about the platform designation, that is always something that we have struggled with because at certain stations, trains could take different platforms, and that is a point of confusion that we hope to address in the future with our PIDs. And then about the cafe car messages, those can certainly be incorporated as service messages within our PIDs.
Thank you, Shirley, and thank you, Ravi, for your presentation.
An additional comment. Will the board be able to see examples of what these PIDs will be displaying at some point before it's actually rolled out?
This is Rob. So we are going to continue to come back to you with updates. This will be one of these, the GTFS will be the first phase here, and that's going to be more of a feed that we give all sorts of third-party access to so they can provide these services. So this will be a step-by-step process over the coming year, and we'll keep coming back to you and giving you updates. This is a big deal for our customers. I think a lot of our customers are going to really benefit immensely from much more current and real-time information on when our trains are arriving, especially at our unstaffed stations.
Thank you again, Director Jane. And let's move to the survey report.
All right, so we'll go, this is real interesting stuff. So every year we do an annual survey. In the last few years, it's been interesting to kind of watch how things are changing with our ridership. So we went out this summer and did a survey. Priscilla will go very quickly through these slides, and feel free to come back and ask us questions about anything you want us to dwell on a little bit more. We'll be happy to take those questions.
All right, good morning, everyone. As Rob mentioned, I'm Priscilla Kalugden. I'm the Marketing Communications Manager for Capitol Corridor. I will go very quickly through the highlights of our onboard survey. For those who are new, we conducted these in June, and we do them annually as part of our ongoing efforts to learn about our customers and their satisfaction levels. We've been doing these for at least 20 years or so, and we use the figures and the testimonials that we receive in them to help guide us in our work. Let's see. And as I mentioned, these were conducted on a weekend and weekdays in June, and they were done in person with a survey team on board the trains. And we had considerably more participation this year than the previous year. We had about 1,000 sample size in 2022, and we had 1,600 this year. Next slide, please. This past June, as you can see, our overall satisfaction, 88% of our customers gave us a rating of satisfied or very satisfied, if you combine those figures together, when asked about both the onboard and at station experience. Customer satisfaction is very important to all of us, so we're really pleased with this result. Next slide. And this has been consistent, over the past several years, the satisfaction level through the pandemic, with 84% stating that they were very satisfied or satisfied back in 2018, through to this year saying 88% were very satisfied or satisfied. Next slide, please. And here we have what's known as a net promoter score. In other words, would you recommend us to a friend to ride? And overwhelmingly, 93% of our customers surveyed would be likely or very likely to recommend us, which we're very pleased about. And last year, this is level with last year, which was 93%. Next slide. This year, 39% of our riders surveyed were traveling for commute or work purposes. This is up 3% from last year's 36%. And as you can see the breakdown here, that people use Capital Corridor for a variety of reasons. Next slide. And then on this slide here, we do ask the question, if Capital Corridor was not available, how would you travel to your destination? And some of the things to note here is that 13% of the riders are transit dependent or choose to ride transit. They would not make their current trip otherwise. 62% are people who would be in their cars otherwise if we were not available for some reason. So this just shows that Capital Corridor really helps to reduce the total number of auto trips in the region. Next slide, please. And this is a very interesting figure. How often are people using Capital Corridor? Well, this year, the average rider is on board 1.5 days per week. This is down from last year, which was 1.6 days per week. And 60% ride just 1 day a week or less. This sort of reflects the ongoing nature of hybrid work schedules, remote work, and growing use of Capital Corridor for leisure events where they may only be traveling on a Saturday or a Sunday to a game. Next slide, please. For access and egress to our stations, the results are fairly even with last year. Many of our riders consistently are using cars to get to this train station, which is not a surprise, but we also have very healthy numbers using other modes like public transit and of course walking and biking to make their connections. Next slide, please. For the tickets and the ticket types that people are using, this is something where we've seen different changes over the years, as you can see. There's been a sharp dip in monthly pass holders where they now make up only 12% of our riders. And with recent changes to our 10 ride pass, which we've done by lengthening its duration from 45 days to 90 days, we now see that more riders are choosing that type of ticket because it gives them a little bit more flexibility. Next slide, please. And this is just to sum up some demographics of our customers, their age, income, and some of the top stations. Davis has jumped up a bit compared to 2022, but otherwise the results are fairly even with the past. And that concludes my highlights of our survey, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Priscilla. Drilling down into these data can answer many of the questions that have been raised here today. Do we have any public comments? I'll turn to the board. Do you have comments or questions?
We have a comment. We have a comment.
Sorry, Chair Rayburn, we do have a comment on Zoom.
Please, you have 2 minutes.
Michael, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Priscilla, for the presentation. And this should only take a minute or less. I do wanted to make a comment about an upcoming service improvement that will take place in 2024. One of the ways people access the Capital Corridor at the Sacramento Valley Station is by way of taking the Gold Line, a light rail line providing service for folks from the city of Folsom to Sacramento Valley Station on a one-seat ride. Currently, regardless of time of day, if you're starting at a station in the city of Folsom, you can only access Capital Corridor or Amtrak trains once every 30 minutes. It is being planned and should be implemented sometime in the second half of 2024, that during the daytime, that service will improve to once every 15 minutes. Construction will take place between January and July to install a passing and second track and a second platform at the Robert G. Holderness Station in Folsom. And the public will see a great service improvement as we go through calendar year 2024. Just keep an eye on what's happening in the Sacramento region and this project in particular. And hopefully we can deliver to you from the Sacramento region a new light rail timetable once the service rolls out and is ready to roll. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnbaugh. Any other comments?
I don't see any additional hands raised.
Thank you. Comments from the board? I'll just note that when I look at the usage and demographics slide number 38, Emeryville is the second highest alighting station, and that suggests that if we meddle with changing the access to that station from San Francisco, it could potentially impact a sizable group of riders. That, although it also shows the number 4 station is Richmond, so that suggests there's good connectivity with BART. But I would encourage our future surveys to actually ask about particular access, whether it's on the 99 or using BART to get across the bay so that we can be data-driven. As well, I would like to see some data-driven analysis on the cafe car. Do we ask, have you used the cafe car in our survey?
Chair Rabin, we have not asked that in recent years. I'd have to look back on the questions to see when we last asked anything about the cafe car.
All right.
But noted. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'll end my comments and move on to the legislative and funding.
And Rob Paget here. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep it super short for this one and just say we had at the last meeting hoped that we would get the Sac Roseville third track project through the Chrissy grant process. We were successful in getting that funded and had a press event to celebrate that. That will represent the first federal dollars coming to Capitol Corridor since 2009. And we think that will be the first of what we expect to be many dollars as we take advantage of the IIJA and the funds that are being provided. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions on what's included in your packet.
Do we have any public comments on the legislative and funding report?
I didn't receive any speaker cards and I don't see any hands raised on Zoom.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to the managing director's report.
All right. So for managing director's report, today I'm going to cover a couple of topics. I'll just do a quick update on our performance and we'll go through the end of the year. I'll give a quick update on Link 21. We're doing some public engagement on that. And then lastly, as a follow-up to our last meeting, talk about some of the active communications efforts we've done over the last couple months. Next slide, please. So here are our numbers, and you've seen this slide before as part of the annual performance report, and I'm happy that everybody noticed the 31% increase over 2022. That's a big deal. We think that's a real great path forward. Revenue also up 30%. Our on-time performance was only 82%, and I do want to note that about 10% of that is related to third-party incidents. And that could be a trespasser incident. It could be a vehicle on the tracks. It could be a fire next to the tracks. I would say the trespasser incidents and the vehicles on tracks are the thing that are really driving the issue. So we're laser focused on that going forward. Next slide, please. And we're going to keep putting this slide up at every meeting. We've had, unfortunately, 5 fatalities since October 1st. So this continues to be a challenge. And in addition to this, we have had cases where we've prevented a fatality and taken action to do so. And we've also had lots of vehicles on tracks. So this is a real struggle that we're working with, and we appreciate the partnership. We have a lot of that at the local level to try to deal with this as best we can. Next slide. Link 21 update. So we're actively engaged in online open house still. A lot of these events have already taken place. If you go to the next slide, we're focused here on getting to stage gate 2. So in 2024, we're going to come back to you and present this more detailed information, and we'll do that as an information item and then come back as a second meeting to take an action on that. So look for that in 2024. Next slide, please. And then on the customer engagement, we've talked about how we really, for a couple years, were not as actively engaged with our customers. A lot of the stuff we've historically done has been in person. We want our customers to feel like they can access us, give us feedback. And so we are back at it. And thanks to my team and for folks like Vernay, who was up here earlier, who's joined our team, they're going to help make that happen. We're pushing out messages to riders. We've had, again, another quarter conversations, which is our way to engage and let people ask us questions. And then had a Cappy Hour recently. We're going to keep doing those. Those are super popular. And what we try to do is staff a couple of those so that the staff's on the train and then come talk to us about, a lot of times it's super minor stuff, but they can come and share stuff. And it really helps us keep an eye on what's going on the service. We're a really small team and we don't always hear about what's happening. And so we think this is a great way to do that. Our customers appreciate our service, but they also have really good, helpful feedback about things that can be better. And then the last thing just to mention, you heard a little bit about it earlier, is bring your dog tomorrow. Come and join us in Emeryville. It's going to be a fun event to talk about that change in service. And I think that's my last slide, right? I'll pause there and be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. You may be a small team, but you're bolstered by the administrative support from everyone from Robert Powers, the general manager of BART, through the district secretary and general counsel and controller treasurer. Katie?
Yeah. When mentioning the pets, when you said you were going to pause there, was that an intentional pun?
Well,
good comment.
Okay. I think we should move on. If anyone has an item from the projects and programs that they want an update to, you can see Rob after the meeting. I'm joking. Seeing no requests, we'll move on to the board directors' reports. Anyone? I'll just share that I recently subscribed to the Tap to Ride program, and I was pleasantly surprised when both my wife, who isn't a participant in Tap to Ride, and I had very different fares that we paid. I received a substantial discount. So the component of the Tap to Ride that processes the discount does function. And I verified the numbers were correct by sharing them with CCJPA staff. I did not have the opportunity to test the fare capping as that requires 3 trips in a week between the same station pairs. But I can imagine how that may suit a number of our riders that are commuters. So I think that brings us to a close. Any final public comments?
I didn't receive any speaker cards, but I do see a hand raised on Zoom.
Okay, we'll go.
Michael, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. One thing I do want to announce, but kind of piggyback on some things said today in the meeting. So as you heard during the presentation about cost cutting and revenue increase, I heavily promoted the connection at Richmond to be the San Francisco connection over the connection. And then later in the meeting, and thank you, Chair Rayburn, for mentioning that Richmond is the number 4 station, indicating that there is very good if not excellent connectivity to BART. So I wanted to piggyback on that and announce, because there is a good connectivity, if not excellent connectivity with BART, and that people are utilizing this as a connection to San Francisco. There is an event coming up, I think, that would benefit Capitol Corridor riders, and especially the riders from Placer, Sacramento, and Yolo counties. The BART general manager, who was mentioned moments ago and is sitting next to Rob Paget at the staff dais, along with Kevin Franklin, BART's new chief of police, are launching a program called the Safe and Clean Plan Listening Tour. And I invite everybody to come out from noon to 1 on Sunday, December 3rd at the Civic Center station above Market Street in San Francisco to participate in this. And because of the hours being noon to 1, it would benefit that people use train 729 westbound to Richmond and 736 eastbound from Richmond to go from or back to stations as far as Auburn. And so this is an open invitation. It's open to everybody. And I would hope people will participate in this, as I hope to, again, on Sunday, December 3rd, Civic Center Station in downtown San Francisco. Thank you very much for letting me publicly make that announcement, and that information is on the BART.gov website under news releases. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnbaum. And that concludes today's meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Hey, well, we had good discussion on the, when you start dealing with how we run things.